Manager mocks disabled customer. Little did he know she was the one paying his salary. Jennifer Parker held her platinum card firmly as the wheels of her chair approached the counter of the most exclusive boutique in the Westfield Century City Mall in New York City. The establishment sparkled with crystal chandeliers and impeccable display cases, but what she found there would change her life forever. It was when Michael Thompson, the store manager, looked at her and whispered something to the saleswoman Jessica that made Jennifer's blood boil. "Jessica, see if you can discourage that customer. People like that just ruin our store's image," murmured Michael, thinking Jennifer couldn't hear. "Good afternoon," said Jennifer, keeping her voice firm. "I'd like to see the pieces from the new collection." Michael approached with a fake smile on his face. His eyes scanned Jennifer's wheelchair with evident contempt. "Look, ma'am, the pieces here are quite expensive. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable in the stores on the ground floor. Down there are some more suitable options." The words cut deep. Jennifer knew that tone well, that way of looking that reduced her entire person to the wheelchair. But today would be different. "I insist on seeing the collection," she replied, holding up the platinum card. Michael let out a dry laugh. "Ma'am, that card might even be real, but our dresses start at $3,000. Are you sure?" A heavy silence fell over the store. Other customers stopped looking through the clothes to watch the scene. Jessica looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Very well," said Jennifer, putting the card back in her purse. "Thank you for the courtesy." Before leaving, she took a business card from her pocket and left it on the counter. Michael didn't even look at the card, too busy laughing about the situation with another employee. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next day, Michael arrived at the store with his usual air of superiority. He adjusted his tie knot in the mirror and checked that all employees were at their posts. The morning routine was interrupted by an urgent call. "Michael, this is Diana from headquarters. I need you to attend an emergency meeting today at 3 in the afternoon. It's about the store's financial situation." "Financial situation?" Michael asked, surprised. "Our numbers are great, Diana. Just come, Michael, and bring all the reports from the last quarter." The phone went dead, leaving Michael puzzled. He had always been proud of his results. The store he managed was one of the most profitable in the chain. All morning, Michael noticed unusual activity at headquarters. Cars coming and going, people with briefcases and serious expressions. Something was happening. At 3 o'clock sharp, Michael entered the meeting room. He found Diana, the regional director, accompanied by 2 men in suits he didn't know. "Michael, sit down," said Diana with a seriousness he had never seen. "I need to inform you that our main investor is dissatisfied with the performance of some units." "Main investor?" Michael repeated. "I didn't even know we had a specific investor." One of the men in suits leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, Parker Enterprises holds 70% of the chain's shares, and the owner has some concerns." The name Parker didn't ring any bells for Michael. He was only worried about the numbers. "But our results are excellent," argued Michael. "We sell more than any other store in the chain." "It's not just a question of sales," said Diana. "There are behavioral issues that need to be addressed." "Behavioral?" The second man opened a briefcase. The investor reported serious problems with the customer service policy, discrimination against customers, inadequate treatment, damage to the brand's image. Michael felt a knot in his stomach, but kept his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. Our customer service is impeccable." "The investor demanded immediate changes," continued Diana. "Otherwise, she threatens to withdraw the investment, and that would mean the closure of half the stores." "This is ridiculous," protested Michael. "Who is this investor? I want to speak with her personally." The men exchanged glances. "That won't be possible at the moment, but she will be observing the operations closely. We suggest you review your customer service practices immediately." The meeting ended with a clear ultimatum: improve customer service or face the consequences. Michael left the room confused and irritated. How could a stranger judge his work without even knowing the store? He returned to the boutique determined to find out what was happening. That's when he noticed Jessica cleaning the counter, clearly nervous. "Jessica, do you know anything about customer complaints?" asked Michael. The saleswoman hesitated. I don't know, not exactly. What do you mean, not exactly? It's just, yesterday there was that situation with the lady in the wheelchair. She left a business card, but you didn't look at it. Michael vaguely remembered the scene. What card? Jessica pointed to the trash can. You threw it away, but I saved a piece. She took a torn piece of the card from the drawer. Michael put the fragments together and managed to read, Jennifer Parker, CEO, Parker Enterprises, Textile Industry. The world seemed to crumble at Michael's feet. The woman he had humiliated the day before was the owner of 70% of the company, the owner of his job, the owner of his salary. Oh no, murmured Michael, feeling his legs weaken. No, no, no. Mr. Michael. Jessica approached, concerned. Jessica, do you remember what I said about that customer yesterday? The saleswoman lowered her eyes. Yes, I remember. And do you remember how I treated her? I remember that too. Michael slumped into his office chair, holding his head in his hands. He had humiliated the company's actual owner. He had told the most powerful woman in the chain to look for another store. For the rest of the day, Michael tried to process the information. Jennifer Parker, CEO of Parker Enterprises. How did he not know that? How had he never researched the owners of the company he had worked at for 5 years? That night, at home, Michael researched everything about Jennifer Parker on the internet. What he discovered left him even more astonished. Jennifer Parker, 43 years old, business administration graduate from Columbia University, MBA from the Wharton School. She had built a textile empire after a car accident that left her paraplegic at 28. Her factories employed more than 3,000 people and were recognized for including workers with disabilities. There were articles about her story of overcoming adversity, entrepreneurship awards, international recognition, and he had treated this woman as if she were a beggar. Michael spent the night awake, trying to think of some way to reverse the situation. Maybe he could call, apologize, explain that it was a misunderstanding. But how do you explain the inexplicable? The next day, he arrived at the store earlier than usual. He needed to think of a strategy. That's when he noticed a woman observing the store windows from outside, a woman in a wheelchair. It was Jennifer. Michael's heart raced. She had come back. Maybe it was his chance to redeem himself. He straightened his suit, rehearsed an apology, and headed for the door. But Jennifer didn't come in. She stayed there observing and writing things down in a small notebook. For 3 days in a row, Jennifer appeared at the mall, always in the same spot, always observing. Michael began to get paranoid. What was she planning? It was Jessica who brought disturbing information. Mr. Michael, that lady in the wheelchair, she's been talking to other employees. Which employees? The cleaning staff, the security guards, even with the manager of the store next door. She asks questions about how we treat customers. Michael felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Jennifer was investigating. She was building a dossier on his customer service practices. Jessica, I need you to be honest with me, said Michael, closing the office door. How do you see me treating customers? The saleswoman shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Michael, Be honest, Jessica. My job may depend on it. Well, you are sometimes a bit selective. You treat customers who seem to have more money better. That's not true, protested Michael, but he knew it was. Mr. Michael, last month you asked me to discourage an elderly lady who wanted to see the fur coats. And the week before last, that young man who came in wearing sneakers and shorts. Okay, interrupted Michael, but that's normal in luxury retail. We need to focus on customers with the highest purchase potential. But Mrs. Jennifer had a platinum card, Jessica reminded him. She had the money to buy anything in the store. Michael didn't know what to say. The truth was that he had judged Jennifer by the wheelchair, not by the credit card, and that was unforgivable. Over the weekend, Michael couldn't relax. He knew Monday would bring news and it probably wouldn't be good. It was then that he received a phone call from Diana. Michael, the situation has become complicated. The investor has presented a detailed report about service problems in your store. What kind of report? Discrimination of customers based on appearance, social class, and disability. She has witnesses, Michael. Employees who confirmed the pattern of behavior. Michael sat down heavily on the sofa. Diana, I can explain. There's not much to explain, Michael. The investor has demanded your immediate dismissal. His world collapsed. 5 years of work, his career, his reputation, all because of a few minutes of prejudice and arrogance. Is there anything I can do? Asked Michael, desperate. She offered an alternative, said Diana after a pause. But you won't like it. Anything, Diana. Anything. You can keep your job if you agree to work as an assistant in one of her factories for 3 months. No manager's salary, no privileges, no office, just to learn some lessons. Michael felt the humiliation burn his face, from luxury boutique manager to factory worker. It was a brutal fall, but it was better than unemployment. I accept, he murmured. Are you sure, Michael? It's not an easy decision. You will be working side by side with people with disabilities. You will understand the difficulties they face every day. I accept, he repeated more firmly. The following Monday, Michael reported to the Parker Enterprises factory in Newark, New Jersey. The contrast with the boutique was shocking. Where there had once been chandeliers and marble, he now saw sewing machines and rolls of fabric. The department supervisor, Mrs. Jenkins, a lady of 60 with graying hair, greeted him. "You're Michael?" she asked, looking him up and down. "Dr. Jennifer told me you'd be coming to work here for a while." "That's right," replied Michael, trying to maintain his dignity. "Well, here everyone works the same. There's none of this being better or worse than anyone else. You'll start in fabric sorting." Mrs. Jenkins took him to an area where several people were organizing rolls of fabric by color and quality. Michael immediately noticed that half of the workers had some type of disability. People in wheelchairs, people with hearing impairments, people with Down syndrome. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It's a great help for us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, "Michael, this is David," said Mrs. Jenkins, introducing a man of about 30 years old in a wheelchair. "He will teach you the job." David extended his hand with a genuine smile. "Pleasure, Michael. Welcome to the team." Michael shook his hand, feeling out of place. David handled the fabrics with impressive skill, separating colors and textures at a speed Michael would never have imagined possible. "How do you manage to work so fast?" asked Michael, impressed. David laughed. "Experience, man. I've worked here for 8 years. In the beginning, I was slow too, but practice makes perfect." During the first week, Michael struggled to keep up with the pace of his colleagues. His hands, used only to holding reports and pens, ached by the end of the day. His back complained about the physical effort, but it was by observing the other workers that Michael began to understand something fundamental. Every person there had found a way to contribute, regardless of their limitations. Sarah, who had a hearing impairment, was the fastest at quality inspection. Brian, who had Down syndrome, knew every type of fabric better than any manual. "Why do you all work so hard?" Michael asked David during a break. "Because Dr. Jennifer gave us an opportunity when no one else would," replied David. "Before working here, I sent my resume to dozens of companies. No one even called me for an interview." "Because of the wheelchair?" "Exactly. People see the wheelchair first, then the person. Or sometimes they only see the wheelchair." David's words echoed in Michael's mind. It was exactly what he had done with Jennifer. He saw the wheelchair first, not the successful woman she was. At the end of the second week, Michael was beginning to adapt to the routine when he had an unexpected encounter. During the break, he saw a wheelchair approaching his section. It was Jennifer. She greeted every employee by name, asked about their families, about their personal projects. She knew each person's story. When she got near Michael, she stopped. "How are you adapting?" she asked without hostility. "Well, I'm learning a lot," replied Michael, avoiding looking directly at her. "What kind of learning?" Michael hesitated. How to explain that he was discovering the obvious, that people with disabilities were complete, capable, valuable people. "I'm learning that I was wrong. About many things." Jennifer nodded. "Mistakes are part of learning, Michael. The important thing is not to repeat them." She moved away, but her words remained etched in Michael's mind. It wasn't hatred he saw in her eyes, it was disappointment, and somehow that hurt more. During the first month at the factory, Michael discovered layers of prejudice he didn't even know existed. He witnessed strange looks when he went out to lunch with David. He heard whispered comments about poor things when they passed groups of people with disabilities. And the worst part, he recognized himself in those comments. How many times had he himself thought that way? It was David who helped him better understand the situation. "Michael, do you want to know why Dr. Jennifer gave you this opportunity instead of simply firing you?" David asked during a pause. "Why?" "Because she believes people can change. She went through a lot of prejudice after the accident. She could have become bitter, resentful. But she decided to turn the pain into purpose." "How so?" David adjusted himself in his wheelchair. "Dr. Jennifer always says that every person she helps change their perspective is a victory against prejudice. If you leave here different from how you came in, she will have achieved her goal." "And what if I don't change? Then you will have missed the greatest opportunity of your life." David's words deeply affected Michael. He was being tested, but he was also being cared for. Jennifer could have destroyed his career, but she chose to offer redemption. In the second month, Michael began to notice changes in himself. He stopped seeing people's limitations first. He started to see potential where before he saw problems. It was then that he met Mrs. Wilson, a 65-year-old lady who worked in the final inspection of the pieces. She had lost the sight in one eye in a household accident, but her decades of experience in sewing made her the most sought-after employee by the supervisors. "Mrs. Wilson, how did you manage to get this job here, huh?" asked Michael during a conversation. "Oh, my dear, it was Dr. Jennifer. I had been unemployed for 2 years. Nobody wanted to hire a 63-year-old lady with partial vision. But she gave me a chance. Do you feel different working here?" Mrs. Wilson smiled. "Here I feel normal, my dear. Here everyone has their differences, and that is seen as a good thing. Out there, I was seen as a burden. Here I am valued for my experience." Michael began to understand what Jennifer had built. It wasn't just a factory. It was a place where people could be fully human, with their limitations and potential. But the biggest lesson was yet to come. At the end of the second month, Michael received an urgent phone call. His younger sister, Emily, had been in a motorcycle accident. She was hospitalized in serious condition. He rushed to the hospital, where he found Emily conscious, but with her legs immobilized. The doctors were not optimistic about her full recovery. "Michael," said Emily, holding her brother's hand, "the doctors said that I might end up in a wheelchair." The words hit Michael like a punch in the stomach. His sister, who had always been active, who loved to dance and play sports, might become paraplegic. "Emily, even if that happens, you will overcome it. You will find a way to be happy." "How can you be so sure?" she asked with tears in her eyes. Michael thought of David, of Jennifer, of all the colleagues at the factory he had learned to admire. "Because I've met incredible people who taught me that a wheelchair doesn't define who you are. It only defines how you move." During the following days, Michael divided his time between the factory and the hospital. He told Emily about his co-workers, about their stories of overcoming adversity, about the strength and determination he had discovered in those people. "Michael, you've changed," said Emily, observing her brother. "You're talking about people with disabilities in a way I've never heard you talk before." "It's true, I have changed." "How?" Michael reflected before answering. "I learned that everyone has limitations. The difference is that some are visible, others are not. And I learned that limitations don't stop anyone from being extraordinary." It was at that moment that he decided to do something he never would have imagined. He called Jennifer. "Dr. Jennifer, this is Michael. I know I have no right to bother you, but I would like to speak in person." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "About what, Michael?" "About everything. About what I've learned, about what I want to do from now on, and about a request I would like to make." Jennifer scheduled a meeting for the next day in her office. Michael arrived promptly, more nervous than he had ever felt in any business meeting. Jennifer's office reflected her personality, functional, accessible, but at the same time elegant, Photos of her family, entrepreneurship awards, certificates of social responsibility. "Have a seat, Michael," said Jennifer, pointing to the chair in front of her desk. "Dr. Jennifer, I came here to thank you," began Michael, "and to apologize. Not just for what happened at the store, but for everything I represented before I met you." "Go on," said Jennifer, watching him closely. "I spent my whole life looking at people superficially, judging by appearance, by physical condition, by what I thought they could offer me. You gave me the opportunity to see beyond that. And what do you see now? I see people, whole, capable, valuable people, people who have so much to teach about overcoming, about determination, about not giving up on dreams." Jennifer leaned forward slightly. "And what is the request you would like to make?" "My sister is in the hospital. She might be paraplegic. And I would like her to meet people like you, like David, like all my colleagues at the factory, so that she sees that it's possible to have a full life, regardless of the circumstances." Jennifer's eyes softened. "Of course, Michael. I would be honored to speak with your sister. And there's one more thing," Michael continued. "When my time at the factory is over, I would like to propose a project for the company." "What kind of project?" "A training program for retail employees, to teach what I've learned, to break down prejudices before they hurt other people." Jennifer smiled for the first time since they'd met. "Now you're speaking my language, Michael. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the third month at the factory, Michael worked on developing his project. With David's help and that of other colleagues, he created an inclusive customer service manual. It wasn't just about people with disabilities, but about respecting all customers, regardless of appearance, social class, or any other difference. Emily fortunately had a better recovery than the doctors expected. Although she still used crutches, she had escaped a wheelchair. But the most important thing was her change in perspective. "Michael, meeting Dr. Jennifer and your friends was the best therapy I could have had," said Emily. "They showed me that what matters isn't what happens to us, but how we react to what happens." "Exactly," Michael agreed. "And that applies to everything in life." On Michael's last day at the factory, his colleagues organized a small farewell party. Mrs. Jenkins made a cake, David prepared an emotional speech, and even Jennifer showed up to say goodbye. "Michael," said David, holding a gift, "we wanted to give you a keepsake from your time here." It was a photo of the whole factory group, with the following dedication: "To Michael, who taught us that it's never too late to start over." "You taught me," replied Michael, moved. "You taught me how to be human." Jennifer approached. "Michael, are you ready to return to retail?" "I am, but not as a manager, as an inclusive customer service instructor." "Perfect, because I have a proposal for you." Jennifer's proposal was ambitious: to create a training program for all the stores in the chain, later expanding to other retail companies. Michael would be the project coordinator, traveling across the country to train employees and managers. "Why are you giving me this opportunity?" asked Michael. "Because you went through the complete transformation. You went from prejudice to empathy. People who have lived through that change are the best ones to teach others." 6 months later, Michael was at the grand opening of the chain's first fully accessible store. Access ramps, counters at varying heights, information in Braille, employees trained in sign language. Jessica, who had become the manager of the store where it all began, greeted him with a smile. "Michael, you need to meet our new employee," she said, pointing to a young woman in a wheelchair who was assisting customers with ease. "This is Ashley. She was hired after your training with our team." Michael observed Ashley helping an elderly customer choose a dress. The service was impeccable, caring, professional, everything it should have been from the start. "How are the store's results?" Michael asked Jessica. "The best in history. When customers feel respected and well taken care of, they come back, and they bring their friends." That afternoon, Michael had a surprise. Jennifer arrived at the store for a supervisory visit, but this time she was received as she deserved, with respect, kindness, and professionalism. "How does it feel coming back here?" asked Michael. "I feel proud," replied Jennifer. "Proud to have believed that people can change." And I feel grateful. Grateful to have met someone who turns humiliation into an opportunity for growth. 2 years later, Michael's program had been implemented in over 300 stores across the United States. Sales had increased, but more importantly, thousands of employees had learned to see the value in every customer. At a retail conference in New York City, Michael was invited to tell his story. In the audience were managers, business owners, and business administration students. "The greatest lesson I learned," said Michael, concluding his speech, "is that prejudice is a choice, and if it's a choice, it can be changed." In the audience, a young woman raised her hand. "How did you manage to overcome years of deep-rooted prejudice?" Michael smiled. "By meeting extraordinary people who taught me that limitations are in our minds, not in people's bodies." After the speech, Michael met Jennifer in the hallway. "How does it feel to be called an inclusion expert?" she asked, joking. "I feel like someone who is still learning, every single day." That's the smartest answer I've ever heard on the subject. At that moment, Michael realized how completely his life had changed. 2 years earlier, he was an arrogant manager who judged people by their appearance. Now he was an educator helping others overcome the same prejudices he once had. "Jennifer, can I ask you a personal question?" said Michael. "Of course." "Why did you decide to give me a second chance? You could have just fired me and moved on." Jennifer thought before answering. "Because I believe good people do bad things out of ignorance, not malice. You weren't a bad person, Michael. You were a person who didn't know, and people who don't know can learn. And if I hadn't learned, then you would have missed the opportunity to become the best version of yourself." 3 months later, Michael received a special invitation. David, his old colleague from the factory, had graduated with a degree in business administration through a company scholarship program and was being promoted to production supervisor. At the celebration party, the entire factory team was present. Mrs. Wilson, now 68 years old, was still the most experienced employee in the department. Brian, who has Down syndrome, had become an instructor for new employees. "Michael," said David during his speech, "you were the first manager I ever met who learned to see us as people first. Thank you for having the courage to change." "Thank you for having the patience to teach me," replied Michael. During the party, Jennifer approached Michael. "I have a proposal for you." "Another one? How about we expand the program to schools? Teach children about diversity and inclusion from an early age?" Michael smiled. "I love the idea, but why schools?" "Because if we can raise a generation without prejudices, we won't need to re-educate adults anymore." The idea became reality 6 months later. The Diversity in Schools program started with 10 public schools in New York City and soon expanded to other cities. Michael developed fun activities where children learned about different types of limitations and abilities. Games in wheelchairs, sign language communication, reading Braille. The children loved it. During one of these visits, an 8-year-old girl raised her hand. "Uncle Michael, my grandmother uses a wheelchair. Can she do everything the same as other people too?" "Of course she can," replied Michael. "Your grandmother is a whole person who uses the wheelchair to get around, just like you use sneakers to run." The simple comparison made the girl's eyes shine. "I get it. The wheelchair is like my grandmother's sneakers." Moments like this reminded Michael why his work was important. Every prejudice broken in childhood meant dozens of humiliations avoided in the future. 5 years after the incident at the boutique, Jennifer's company had become a national benchmark for corporate inclusion. Michael's program was adopted by other retail chains, restaurants, and even banks. In an interview for a business magazine, Michael was asked about the most important moment of his transformation. "It was when I realized that prejudice made me miss amazing opportunities to meet fantastic people," he replied. Jennifer Parker was a customer who could have brought a lot of value to our store, but I only saw the wheelchair. And now I see the person first, always the person. The interview had a nationwide impact, and Michael began receiving invitations to speak at universities. His story became a case study in business and psychology courses. But for Michael, the most important recognition came on an ordinary afternoon at work. He was visiting a store in Miami when an employee approached him. "Are you the Michael from the training program?" she asked. "Yes, I am. I wanted to thank you. Before the training, I treated customers I thought were different poorly. After you came here, I learned to see every person as unique and special." "And how did that change your work?" "It changed everything. Now I have loyal customers who keep coming back because they know they will be treated well, and I feel proud of my work." These small victories accumulated every day. Employees who changed their perspective, customers who felt respected, companies that discovered the value of diversity. At a Parker Enterprises board meeting, Jennifer presented the results of the inclusion program. "In 5 years, we reduced discrimination complaints by 85%. We increased customer satisfaction by 60%. And most importantly, we created an environment where everyone feels valued." One of the directors asked, "What was the program's total investment?" "Less than what we used to spend on lawsuits for discrimination," replied Jennifer. "Investing in inclusion is not only morally right, it's financially smart." After the meeting, Jennifer called Michael for a private conversation. "Michael, I have a different proposal this time. What do you have in mind? How about we create an independent consultancy? You could take your knowledge to companies in all sectors, not just retail." The proposal was tempting, but Michael hesitated. "Jennifer, I learned everything from you. It wouldn't be fair to compete with your company." Jennifer laughed. "Michael, it wouldn't be competition, it would be multiplication. The more people learn about inclusion, the better for everyone." And so, Inclusion America was born, a consultancy specialized in diversity and accessibility. Michael was the managing partner, but Jennifer continued to be his mentor and advisor. The first client was a supermarket chain that was having problems with customer service. Within 6 months of work, Michael implemented changes that transformed the shopping experience for people with different needs. Access ramps, wider aisles, products at varying heights, staff trained in ASL and Braille. But most importantly, a change in mindset. "The secret," Michael explained in his training sessions, "isn't to focus on what the person cannot do, it's to focus on what they can do." The consultancy grew rapidly. Within 2 years, it was serving clients in 10 states across the United States. Each project was an opportunity to plant seeds of change. On one of these business trips, Michael was at an airport when he witnessed a familiar scene. A store employee was clearly uncomfortable assisting a blind person. Michael discreetly approached and heard the employee speaking loudly and slowly, as if the blind person were also deaf or had an intellectual disability. After the customer left, Michael introduced himself to the employee. "Excuse me, but I noticed you seemed unsure while helping that customer." "It's just, I never know how to deal with people like that," the young man admitted. "How about we start with the basics? She isn't a person like that. She is a person who cannot see, and that doesn't affect her ability to think, hear, or communicate." Michael spent the next 15 minutes talking with the employee, offering simple but important tips: how to speak directly to the person, not to their companion; how to offer help without being intrusive; how to use natural language. "Wow," said the employee. "No one ever taught me that. Thank you." Small interactions like this were what motivated Michael the most. He knew that employee would never treat a blind person inappropriately again. 7 years after his transformation, Michael was invited to receive a national award for social inclusion. The ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., with dignitaries and business leaders from across the country in attendance. In his acceptance speech, Michael told his full story. He spoke about the prejudiced man he had been, about the lesson Jennifer gave him, about the transformation that changed his life. "If there's one thing I'd like you to take away from tonight," Michael concluded, "it's that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to be better than we were yesterday." In the audience, David, Mrs. Wilson, Jessica, and dozens of others who had been part of his journey applauded emotionally. But it was Jennifer's proud smile that touched his heart the most. After the ceremony, in a private conversation, Jennifer said, "Michael, you have exceeded all my expectations." "Why?" "Because you didn't just change. You became an agent of change. Every person you train will impact others. It's an infinite multiplier effect. None of this would have happened if you hadn't believed in me. I only offered the opportunity. You made the right choices." That night, Michael reflected on his journey, from arrogant manager to inclusion specialist, from a person who discriminated to a person who educated others about diversity. The change hadn't been easy. There were moments of internal resistance, discomfort with his own discoveries, shame for the man he had been. But every day at the factory, every conversation with David, every lesson from Mrs. Wilson had shaped a new version of himself. 10 years after the incident in the boutique, Michael was back in that same store, but now as a consultant implementing accessibility improvements. Jessica, still the manager, greeted him warmly. "Michael, this store has changed so much since that day, hasn't it?" "Completely changed," Michael agreed, observing the adaptations. "And sales? The best numbers in the chain. When all customers feel welcome, everyone wins." That afternoon, a customer in a wheelchair entered the store. She was immediately greeted by Ashley, who offered help in a natural and respectful way. "Can I show you the new items in the winter collection?" asked Ashley. "Of course, I'd love to see them," the customer replied. Michael observed the scene with emotion. This was how it should have been from the start. Simple, natural, human. Jennifer arrived a little later to check on the implementations. "How does it feel being back here?" asked Michael. "I feel victorious," she replied. "Not for revenge, but for transformation. This store is proof that change is possible. And I feel grateful for having learned that inclusion is not a favor, it's a right." At that moment, the two of them watched Ashley assisting the customer in the wheelchair. The interaction was fluid, professional, and full of mutual respect. "Michael," said Jennifer, "that could have been me 10 years ago. But thanks to your change, she is having the experience I should have had. And thanks to your generosity, thousands of people are having better experiences every day." At the end of that day, Michael and Jennifer left the store together. In the parking lot, she stopped her wheelchair next to his car. "Thank you, Michael." "For what?" "For proving that my bet was right, for becoming the man I knew you could be. Thank you for seeing potential where I only saw limitations, in me and in others." 12 years after his transformation, Michael still regularly visited the factory where it all began. David had become the production manager. Mrs. Wilson, now retired, still visited her former colleagues. Brian coordinated an integration program for new employees. During one of these visits, Michael found a new employee being trained by David. The young man seemed unsure, clearly not used to working with people with disabilities. "David, introduce me to the new colleague," said Michael. "This is Nathan," said David. "He started this week." Michael greeted Nathan and noticed his tension. "First time working with people with disabilities?" "Yes," admitted Nathan. "I'm a bit lost." "That's normal," said Michael. "I was too at first. Want a tip?" "Sure." Stop seeing the limitations. Start seeing the possibilities. Over the following months, Michael followed Nathan's development. The transformation was gradual, but evident. The young man went from unsure to confident, from suspicious to admiring of his colleagues. "You know, Michael," said Nathan after 6 months, "I thought working here would be difficult because of people's differences, but I've discovered that everyone here is just normal people doing their jobs." "Exactly," replied Michael. "Normal people with normal lives. The only difference is that some use wheelchairs, others wear glasses, others use hearing aids. They're just different tools." 15 years after the start of his journey, Michael was approached by a young university student who was writing a thesis on social transformation. "Mr. Michael, what motivated you to change so radically?" asked the student. "Meeting extraordinary people who showed me my own mediocrity," replied Michael, "and discovering that I could be better. But it must have been difficult to admit you were wrong about so many things." "It was. But you know what would have been harder? Continuing to be a person I didn't respect." The conversation lasted 2 hours. The student asked dozens of questions about prejudice, personal transformation, and social impact. At the end, he asked one final question. If you could go back in time, would you change anything? Michael thought deeply before answering. "I would change many things. I wish I had learned these lessons earlier. to have avoided hurting people along the way. But I wouldn't change the learning itself. It made me who I am today. At 50 years old, Michael had become a national reference in inclusion and diversity. His consulting firm served companies across the United States. His books were used in universities. His lectures filled auditoriums. But for him, the greatest recognition still came from ordinary people who changed their perspectives after his trainings. At a conference in Boston, a participant approached him after his talk. "Mr. Michael, I work at a school, and I used to be very prejudiced against children with Down syndrome. After watching your lecture online, I completely changed. Today, one of those children is my favorite student." "What changed in you?" asked Michael. "I stopped seeing the syndrome and started seeing the child, a sweet, affectionate, and very intelligent child in her own way." Stories like this repeated themselves at every event. Teachers who discovered the potential of students with disabilities, doctors who began treating patients with more humanity, business owners who transformed their workplaces. One September afternoon, Michael received a special invitation. Jennifer would be celebrating 20 years as CEO of Parker Enterprises, and there would be a party. "Michael, you were fundamental in this journey," said Jennifer. "I would like you to give a speech at the party." It would be an honor. The party brought together employees, partners, and friends from 2 decades of work. Michael carefully prepared his words, wanting to properly honor the woman who had changed his life. "Jennifer Parker," Michael began, "is a person who turns humiliation into opportunity, who turns prejudice into learning, who turns victims into victors." He briefly told his story, explaining how the meeting with Jennifer had completely redirected his life. "If today I am able to help other people overcome prejudices," Michael concluded, "it is because an extraordinary woman believed that I could be better than I was. Jennifer, thank you for saving not just my job, but my soul." The audience rose in an emotional ovation. Jennifer, visibly moved, approached Michael. "Thank you for justifying my bet," she whispered. "Thank you for betting." That night, during the party, Michael spoke with dozens of the company's employees. Each one had a story about how Jennifer had positively impacted their lives. Former employees who had grown professionally, people with disabilities who had found opportunities, entire families that had benefited from the company's inclusive policies. "You know, Michael," said David, now with graying hair but still energetic, "Dr. Jennifer always says that you were her most successful transformation project." "Why?" "Because you multiplied what you learned. Every person you train is an extension of her philosophy." During the following years, Michael expanded his work to other countries in Latin America. His methodologies were adapted for different cultures, but the principle remained the same. See the person before the condition. At an international conference in Chile, he met other inclusion activists. Each had their own story of transformation, their personal motivation for fighting prejudice. "What unites us," Michael said in his speech, "is not just the cause. It is the certainty that people can change when they have the right opportunity." After the conference, he received an invitation to bring his programs to Europe. The offer was tempting, but Michael hesitated. His life was in the United States, close to the people who had transformed him. He talked to Jennifer about the opportunity. "Go," she said without hesitation. "The world needs to learn what you have to teach." "But what about here, and our projects? Here you have already planted enough seeds. It's time to plant elsewhere." Michael spent the next 2 years dividing his time between Europe and the United States. He implemented inclusion programs in German companies, trained employees in French schools, and gave lectures at English universities. But it was in Barcelona that he had one of his most memorable experiences. During a training session at a technology company, a young executive approached him. "Mr. Michael, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "How did you manage to change so much? I see myself in your story. I have prejudices that I know are wrong, but I can't overcome them." Michael looked into the young man's eyes and saw something familiar, the same arrogance disguised as insecurity that he himself had once had. "Want to know the secret?" Michael said. "Stop trying to overcome your prejudices. Start getting to know people." "What do you mean?" Go to places where you meet people different from you. Talk to them. Listen to their stories. Discover who they are beyond the differences you see. The young man followed the advice. 3 months later, he sent Michael an email. I started volunteering at an association for blind people. I discovered a world I didn't know existed. Thank you for opening my eyes. Messages like this arrived weekly, people from different countries reporting their personal transformations after participating in Michael's programs. At 55, Michael decided to write his autobiography. From Prejudice to Inclusion, A Journey of Transformation became a bestseller within months. At the book launch in New York City, the auditorium was packed. Jennifer gave the author's introduction. Michael Thompson, she said, is living proof that people can change, that it's possible to overcome mental limitations and become a better version of oneself. During the book signing, an elderly woman approached with tears in her eyes. Mr. Michael, my grandson has autism. After reading your book, I started seeing him differently. Now I see his unique qualities instead of his difficulties. How did that change your relationship? It changed everything. He blossomed when he realized I accepted him for who he is. Today, we are best friends. Stories like this justified all the work. Every prejudice broken meant an improved life, a strengthened relationship, a more inclusive future. 20 years after the incident at the boutique, Michael was back in that store for the last time. The company had decided to completely renovate it, turning it into a model of accessibility. Jessica, now the regional director, greeted him for a final visit before the renovation. Michael, this store has a special history with us, doesn't it? It does. It's where I learned the most important lesson of my life. They walked through the aisles where it had all begun, the counter where Jennifer had left her business card, the spot where Michael had displayed his worst prejudice. You know, Jessica, Michael said, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had treated Jennifer well that day. What would have happened? I probably would have remained the same limited person. The humiliation I caused was what led to my transformation. So you're grateful you made a mistake? I'm grateful I learned. The mistake was just the starting point. That afternoon, Jennifer arrived for one last visit to the original store. The three stood there in silence, contemplating the place that had changed their lives. Jennifer, Michael said, if you could go back to that day, would you do anything differently? Maybe I would have been tougher on you, she laughed. But deep down, I think everything happened the way it was supposed to. Why? Because your transformation wouldn't have been so profound if it had been easy. You needed to hit rock bottom to discover you could swim back to the surface. Jennifer's words echoed in Michael's mind for weeks. Truly, if the change had been superficial, it wouldn't have lasted. A complete transformation of perspective was necessary. 2 years later, at 58, Michael decided to retire from active consulting, but not from the life mission he had embraced. He created a foundation dedicated to training new multipliers of inclusion, young people who would be trained to carry forward the work of breaking down prejudices and building a more inclusive society. The first class of the Michael Thompson Foundation had 20 university students from different fields. For 6 months, they experienced situations similar to those Michael had gone through. They worked in inclusive companies, spent time with people with different types of disabilities, and studied cases of social transformation. At the end, each one developed a personal impact project. The goal, Michael explained to the first class, isn't just to learn about inclusion. It's to become better people. People capable of seeing beyond appearances. Sarah, a young psychology student, developed a project to train healthcare professionals. Andrew, a future lawyer, focused on legal accessibility. Olivia, an education student, created methodologies for inclusive schools. Each project reflected not only technical knowledge, but genuine personal transformation. On the day of the first class's graduation, Jennifer was invited to the ceremony. In her speech, she said, "You are the second generation of social transformers. Michael was the first. Now it's up to you to multiply this change to a third, fourth, fifth generation." The foundation grew quickly. Within 5 years, it had already trained over 200 multipliers of inclusion spread across the country, each one carrying forward the mission of building a more just society. At 62, Michael received a special honor. The federal government created the Michael Thompson Award for Social Inclusion, intended to recognize people and organizations that excelled in promoting diversity. At the award's creation ceremony, Michael was invited to give a speech. As he stepped onto the stage, he saw familiar faces in the audience: David, Mrs. Wilson, Jessica, Ashley, Nathan, and dozens of other people who had been part of his journey. "When I began this journey," Michael said, "I was a person who excluded. Today I hope I am a person who includes. The difference isn't in what I do, but in how I see the people around me." He paused, looking directly at Jennifer. "I learned that inclusion is not charity, it is recognition. Recognition that everyone has value regardless of their apparent limitations." The speech received a standing ovation for over 5 minutes, but for Michael, the most important applause came from Jennifer, who smiled proudly from the front row. After the ceremony, in a private conversation, Jennifer made a surprising revelation. "Michael, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "When I decided to give you a second chance, many people thought I was crazy. They said you wouldn't change, that it was a waste of time. And what made you insist? The way you looked at me when you realized who I was. I didn't see malice in your eyes. I saw fear, shame, regret, and that told me there was hope. And if you had been mistaken? Then I would have lost 3 months training you at the factory, but I gained 25 years of positive social impact. It was the best investment I ever made." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of transformation and overcoming. Do you believe people can really change like Michael did? Have you ever gone through an experience that changed your view of the world? Share your reflections in the comments, because we love reading your honest opinions. If you enjoyed this touching story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that touch the heart.